Before we can understand what the 3.5mm audio jack has been, and why it has been so common and universal, we have to understand a little bit of what digital audio is. If you don't care and just want to know so you can, shout at tech companies or rant to strangers, or even your family and get uninvited from Thanksgiving, please skip to timestamp shown on screen. For the rest of you, welcome. Something that is incredibly important, but not thought about by the majority of people when they think about audio, is that every single signal coming in and out of an audio jack is analog. That's right. If you plug speakers into, say, this ancient turntable, and this trendy and with the times MP3 player, the signal going through the wire is the same thing, despite one being analog and the other being digital. Have you ever looked at an MP3 file's details, for fun, and seen two numbers under it? Sample rate and bit rate? No? Only me? Alright. So, the way digital audio works is it takes samples, or measures, of the frequency that the microphone is putting out. When a microphone records, it converts the frequency of sound around it to voltage. The recorder then takes that voltage and converts it back to a frequency. Every time it takes a sample, that voltage or frequency gets written down and recorded. A sample is, therefore, just a measure of frequency at any given moment. The rate at which the recorder takes these samples varies based on the file, as more samples make the audio sound better but take up more space, and vice versa. However, the most common sample rate is 44.1 kHz, which means that 44,100 samples exist of the audio every second. So MP3s are a digital file that consist of a bunch of these samples in a long ordered list. More or less, details aren't really important here. When you play these files back, the samples get read back and played, and in between them, the device smoothly interpolates between the samples, finding midpoints so there are no abrupt jumps. It then converts the result of this interpolation to a voltage, and sends that through the headphone jack or speakers, much in the same way the microphone did. The signal it sends out to the audio jack is just as smooth and non-digital as any vinyl player. Because of this, the audio jack standard hasn't changed much over the years. You can plug a headphone manufactured this year into a turntable from the 1960s or 70s. You can plug an amplifier from the 70s or 80s into an audio device manufactured this year. So it became ubiquitous. Every device can support it easily enough, with amazing cross-compatibility. But recently, of course, the audio jack has started disappearing. First from phones, then tablets, and now maybe even some laptops. But why? When the first iPhone was introduced by Steve Jobs in 2007, it was described as
an iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator.
It was a very clear evolution from iPods and other MP3 players, and this was, in fact, a large amount of the appeal. One less gadget cluttering up your pockets, and even easier playback of music. Going with this iPod evolved trend, it sure enough had a headphone jack. But for better or for worse, customer priorities changed. Now, a customer doesn't care that much about a headphone jack. They likely listen to music wirelessly, and importantly, the removal of a headphone jack won't cause that many people to switch.
But weren't everyone all upset about it?
Yes, but how many of those customers switched away from iPhones? Apple, of course, realized this, and so figured it was safe to remove the headphone jack. But that ignores an important question. Why did they remove the headphone jack at all? The answer, as always, is money. See, a company can't stay still, money-wise. This is not about innovation, it's about profit. In publicly traded companies, the stockholders overwhelmingly don't really care about the long-term well-being of the company, or even if its profits are necessarily good for a while, because the real profit as a stockbroker is by buying low and selling high. So, a stockbroker's goal is to make the stock price of the company they bought stock from rise in order to sell that stock and make profit. To raise the stock price, the company needs more revenue. Initially, a company experiences rapid, legitimate growth. More and more people buy their product, and the profit rises year by year. This is where real innovations and competition come in. But very soon, the profit reaches a plateau. All the people interested have already bought or are already buying the product. So in order to generate more revenue, the company needs to resort to anti-consumer practices to acquire more profit. This is why video game companies introduce microtransactions and loot boxes. It's why Intel overprices their processors and locks the memory frequencies of them down. And it's why Apple removed the headphone jack. See, Apple is smart and knows that people are invested in the Apple ecosystem and likely won't switch. So so they can safely remove the headphone jack. Contrary to popular belief, the reason for Apple's removal of the jack wasn't just AirPods, rather it was the Lightning port. See, Apple devices all use a proprietary port, so any company that produces Apple accessories, say a iPhone headphone or a iPhone headphone jack adapter, has to pay Apple for every single accessory they sell. Apple makes millions from licensing their custom port to accessory manufacturers alone. Apple's revenue and stocks increased as a result of their headphone jack removal. So why did Android follow? Well, importantly, they didn't immediately. At first, they predicted that loads of iPhone users would flock to Android due to the removal of the jack, something that Apple already knew wouldn't happen due to customer research. And so, they made ads that not only mocked Apple, but advertised their inclusion of a headphone jack, such as this infamous Pixel ad. However, they quickly realized that this didn't happen. And of course, their shareholders, too, demanded growth. So what did they do? Well, they removed the headphone jack and came out with wireless headphones that they could sell. And so, the headphone jack is now sadly on its deathbed, 70 years after its invention, for no other reason than the demands of not the market, but the shareholders. It's sad that so much backwards compatibility is being abandoned for practically no reason. There are numerous consequences to this shift. New wireless headphones require the production of millions of tiny lithium-ion batteries, designed in such a way that they are irreparable and will go straight from our ears into the landfills. Old headphones, made using premium, expensive materials, are now being abandoned. This change is especially tragic because the actual speakers, or drivers in case of headphones, are virtually indestructible. Ancient 60s speakers still work today flawlessly, even if their electronics don't. So think again before upgrading to a phone without a jack. It might be too late to save it, but we can still try.